Because I Could Not Stop for Death by Emily Dickinson. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but ourselves and immortality.
We slowly drove. He knew no haste, and I put away my labors and my leisures too, for his civility.
We passed the school where children strove at recess in the ring. We passed the fields of gazing grain. We passed the setting sun. Or rather, he passed us. The dews drew quivering and chill, for only gossamer my gown, my tippet only tulle.
We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground.
Since then, 'tis centuries, and yet feels shorter than the day. I first summarized the horse's head, where towards eternity.
I feel like Dickinson was trying to present that in our mundane, repetitive activities, we lose sight what's truly important in our lives. Because once you're deceased in this life you've lived, all you have left is yourself, nothing else. To create this sense of self-thought, she uses these dashes that are her staple to give this variety of perspective.
In this stanza, she is talking about her experience in relationship with death. In the first line, he slowly drove, he knew no haste. She is implying that her experience with death was slow, but also it seems that anyway death is her friend. In the last lines, and I put away my labor and my leisures too for his civility, Emily Dickinson is referring to setting aside her life's work and her enjoyment of her free time, all for her relationship with death. In other words, Emily Dickinson is preparing to die. It seems Emily Dickinson is only preparing to die because of her overall relationship with death. Civility most merely means formal politeness. In Emily Dickinson's word choice of civility, she proves our theory that death is actually her friend.
In lines 1 and 2 of stanza 3, the carriage passes by a school with children at recess. Passing by the school represents leaving behind youth and memories. In line 3, the carriage passes by fields of gazing grain. We usually think of grain as blowing in the wind, but gazing suggests that in this instance it's still, which creates a kind of spooky mood for the rest of the piece. Stanza 3 uses the repeated phrase "we passed" as an anaphora, which seems to slow down this stanza of the poem to almost mimic the steps of the horse pulling the carriage. The first line of stanza 4 has two meanings. On the surface, it means that the sun is going below the horizon, as in the sun is setting, and its second meaning is that the speaker is leaving their physical body on earth and passing into the afterlife. The author uses several em dashes in this line to show a shift in tone, from more positive, meaning life, to a darker tone which symbolizes death. In the next three lines, the speaker describes how cold they're getting on their night carriage ride. Part of this is because the speaker is not wearing warm clothes, only gossamer and tulle, which shows not only that they're ill-prepared for this journey on the carriage, but also ill-prepared for dying. Being cold also takes on a quite literal meaning, because when most things die, they do get colder.
When we read this stanza, we noticed that certain words were capitalized. The words house, swelling, ground, and roof, and cornice are all capitalized. If you look at these words as a whole, they are all either parts of a house, an actual house, or describing the ground around the house. Even though we already know that Emily is describing an experience with death, this gives us some more information about her experience and friendship with death. The poem stanza seems to be describing a set excuse for a house. Through the previous stanzas, we have collected that they were actually memories of Emily's. This house, for example, could also be one of her memories. It could be her childhood home or the home she's about to face death in. This description of her house also sets a deep, dark tone for the poem as a whole. In a way, it is almost depressing the way she describes this house, as if it was a bad memory.
The last stanza is describing how she has been dead the entire time, and she's explaining how the days that followed her death or that happened afterwards is becoming shorter than the days she actually died.